Great. Well, thank you so much for having us. It's really exciting to be here and be part of this conversation. So again, I'm Brett Thatcher, and I'm here with Nathan Yapel, who manages our bakery program here at the farm. Just to give a little overview of what we plan to talk about, we're going to start with talking just briefly about problems with purpose that we hear people talking about as they're seeking treatment. We're going to talk about the benefits of a work therapy program that's integrated with psychotherapy, particularly the way we do it here at Gould Farm. And then finally, Nathan's going to talk with us about a day in the life of work program. And then we'll hand it over to the dorm team to talk more about work and community integration. So individuals coming to the farm for treatment often describe a lack of purpose with a few themes in terms of presenting problems that seem consistent across diagnoses in my experience. I hear a lot about isolation, about not having enough meaningful connections, about not having meaningful work or structure. I hear a lot about grief over years lost to battling mental health challenges, as if one's life has only been and is only about the disorder or their struggles. I also hear a lot of things like, why get up, why try, it doesn't matter. There's this conviction that any efforts toward meaning or purpose are useless, sort of this personal nihilism. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has really intensified a lot of this and precipitated lost work and structure, lost connections. And yet, even those individuals who come speaking about those lost things, I hear this undercurrent, this feeling of familiarity, this sense of yet again, that the current context has only highlighted pre-existing disconnections from a meaningful sense of purpose. So here at the farm, one of our primary ways, I guess, of managing or assisting with developing a sense of purpose and meaning is through our work therapy program. The farm was founded in 1913, around the time when the moral treatment movement was happening, which was a movement that started in Europe in the 19th century. It really emphasized that individuals with what we now call mental health challenges or disabilities can lead meaningful, productive lives. They can contribute to their communities and not just be sort of locked away in institutions. It really prioritized more humane treatment. Some doctors lived on the premises. There was orchards and farms for patients to work at. So with that background, certainly the farm has changed a lot in the last century plus, but a lot of what we do still sort of derives from those foundations. And Nathan's going to tell us a little bit about what work therapy looks like right now.
Thanks, Brett. As I said, my name is Nathan Yapel, and I manage the baking program here at the farm. It's one of our work teams that guests are a part of when they come and join the community. So as Brett was saying, it's one of the major therapeutic tools we have here in our treatment program. And folks get, generally speaking, about 30 hours of structure by being in work at the farm. And that fills most of the time people spend in community. So work is a large arena for practicing and utilizing the skills folks are working on and building the strengths that they work on in therapy while they're here at the farm. The work program is 30 hours. It structures people's time, and it's also a really great way for people to get a sense of normalcy as they're also in treatment here, as a thing to do, a way to be a part, not necessarily have sort of the therapeutic process or experience in the forefront of whatever's going on for them. It can really be a good normalizing way to be a part of the community. And the 6 different work teams that people are a part of here at the farm function to support the daily life of the community where we all live together and work. So our guests are in residences here. It's built like a small community, like a small town. Most of the staff also live on property here. And so we get to interact with each other at work, in activities, at meals, outside of work. And the 6 work teams, like I said, they support the daily functioning of the community here. So a little description of our work teams. We have our forestry and grounds team, which maintains the outdoor spaces here, our lawns, our landscaped areas, the trail network in our forest and the forests themselves. They harvest firewood for the wood stoves in our homes and buildings, and they tend the sugar maples in our forest, from which they harvest sap in the spring and they make maple syrup. Also other kinds of seasonal projects that come up throughout the year. Right now, we've been working on harvesting apples from local orchards in our own orchard and making cider with them. Our garden team manages a few acres of outdoor garden space, as well as a network of hoop houses and a greenhouse. And they grow produce for the community's consumption in our community meals, as well as for a small CSA that they operate that serves members of the wider Southern Berkshire community. And again, right now they're pressing cider with apples that we've harvested locally. And in the winter and springtime, they help the F&G team maintain our sugar bush and harvest sap that becomes maple syrup. Our farm team comprises a beef herd, market hogs, and a herd of dairy cows, as well as a collection of rotational pastures and hay fields. The dairy produces milk for the community's consumption, along with the beef and the pork that comes from our beef and pig herds. And the milk that the dairy produces goes to our bakery, where we make yogurt, ice cream, and also a cheese operation that sells cheddar to local vendors in Southern Berkshire County. Our kitchen team is another one of our teams that produces 3 meals a day and a tea time snack every day of the week for the whole community to share. They use produce from the garden, milk from the farm, the beef and pork also that is grown there, produce, breads and yogurt and other goods from the bakery. And our bakery, where I work, provides various types of breads, bagels, pastries, and desserts for the community's consumption, as well as value-added dairy like the yogurt and ice cream I mentioned from our farm team. And we make use of produce from our garden. That's also another real seasonal thing. In the summertime, we're using greens and different vegetables to make savory items. Right now, we're doing a lot of pumpkin stuff. We've harvested several different kinds of pumpkins, and we're using that to make things like pies, mousses. I made a pumpkin ice cream today down at the bakery that's going to show up in community this weekend. And before the pandemic closed restaurants for indoor service, we also operated a small weekend cafe that served our homemade pastries and other merchandise that we produce in-house to people from the public. And then lastly, our roadside cafe is a small breakfast and lunch diner that's open 4 days a week to the whole public, where guests get vocational training and experience in food service and preparation and marketing our bakery's products to the public. It's a little bit about what all of the work programs do and look like here at the farm.
Thanks, Nathan. So why work? What does work have to do with mental health recovery or purpose? We really operate from a conviction that participation enables guests to find meaning and purpose in the day-to-day, certainly over time. I really like the way our work program primer puts it. It says, through work, we discover that each of us can contribute in a meaningful way. We can do more than we think we can, and things are possible even when they're difficult. I think the realization of these benefits, I hear coming back to me in the therapy under a couple headings. I think about I contribute. From there, people begin to see that all work teams here demonstrably and explicitly benefit the Gould Farm community. Individuals can see the impact and importance of their contributions in real time. So someone at the farm may see a cow, it needs to be milked. If I don't milk the cow is going to get sick. That milk is going to go to the bakery. They're going to make it into yogurt. The yogurt's going to be available for me and for the community for breakfast on Thursday. I know maybe I'm in the kitchen and I know lunch needs to go out, so it's important that I'm here making this dish so we have something to eat. Even something like clearing the trails on the forestry and grounds team, I know that I and my friends are going to go on a guided hike on Saturday, so I've improved the trail to make that more enjoyable. Individuals on the work teams are also part of a team, and to develop teamwork and a sense of belonging there. They see that being present and active matters to others. The work needs to be done. If I'm not here doing it, someone else needs to, and me being here makes the whole experience different for everyone. And there's really a purpose that develops in gaining a sense of mutual responsibility to and for one another. The other heading I think about is a sense of I can, that going and doing even when it's difficult, I can begin to see more possibilities. I can begin to see myself differently. I can see myself as having more agency than I previously believed. It was interesting. I was sitting with someone yesterday morning, and he was talking about how before coming to the farm, he worked a single 5-hour shift every week, and he thought that was all he could do and could ever do, and was sort of marveling at the fact that he participates in a 30-hour work week, and was speaking with a great deal of pride and accomplishment in really seeing himself differently and more capable. In the work teams, you know, with the wide variety, people are really given the opportunity to discover new interests, to discover and recognize skills and strengths. And they can really begin to observe in themselves the development of transferable skills and capacities that they'll be able to use in different contexts beyond the farm. Finally, just to note that work, I see work here as both a coping skill in itself. You might think about a constructive distraction, but also really is a good forum to practice coping skills with support and coaching from work team leaders. The work team leaders are really, really skilled at coaching mindfulness, grounding, emotion regulation, and ways to use the work and to be able to do the work even when struggling. And in thinking about integrating the work with sort of larger treatment goals, larger recovery goals, one tool we use is our common language. You can see on the graphic on the screen. We've divided it into 3 broad categories of mind, heart, and body. I mean, it really provides a conceptual bridge between work program and therapy. A lot of people, you know, even after going through the admissions process, wonder, why am I doing so much work? Why am I just working every day? What does this have to do with recovery? And as you look through the words, I think you can see that it really enables a language to orient work program tasks and participation to larger treatment goals. So, for example, someone working on the farm may say something like, well, I may not want to be a farmer for the rest of my life. On the farm team, I've improved my communication skills. I've learned to ask for what I need and be assertive. I've begun to trust that I can rely on others, even though they disappoint me sometimes or piss me off sometimes. I can work more flexibly with my expectations, and I've taken ownership over what I do each day. And of course, work program and communication between guests, work program leaders, and clinicians provides a really good forum for gathering fodder for psychotherapy. Think about relationships, about relationship to authority, about taking on a role, seeing our own abilities, our accomplishments, the shame that arises when we see that we can't, and other barriers that come up. Work program really surfaces a lot of things that enables it to be addressed. And I think it's important here to underscore too, that here at the farm, guests and staff all live on the same property, that we're all here together in community for the sort of the whole of our lives, not just the workday, which really provides a potent opportunity for the relational work that undergirds recovery and a sense of meaning in the world. A couple types of meetings we use to facilitate the integration as well are work program reflection meetings and network meetings. These are forums to link daily work with recovery, develop support and track goals, and reflect on strengths as well as barriers to be addressed. They also provide an opportunity to observe and offer feedback on the development of strengths, skills, and capabilities. In both of these meetings, we've integrated and adapted reflective practice and other principles from open dialogue, which is a Finnish network model of treatment. And we found that to be a really useful way of making space for many voices, many points of view, and to enable people to hear really difficult things sometimes. The work program reflection meetings are run by the work team, begin sort of by talking about how it's going on the team, as well as goals for work and how they relate to long-term goals or sort of overarching treatment goals, as well as the struggles that brought them into treatment. Our network meetings are sort of like a more traditional treatment planning meeting. So they'll involve a clinician, the guest, a member of each of the guest work teams, someone from residential, maybe someone from the nursing office, to sort of bring all those different areas together and see how they relate to someone's process here at the farm. And finally, I just want to say, before I turn it over to Nathan to talk about what a day in the work program looks like, that when we're doing transition planning, whether or not a guest is planning on moving into one of our transition houses or programs here in the Berkshires or in the Boston area, we work with them before they discharge to develop a structure of about 30 hours to really mimic what's happened here in whatever community they're moving to, so that they have that structure to plug into once they leave the farm. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nathan.
Thanks, Brett. All right, so a day in the life at Gould Farm in the work program. The day begins with morning meeting, which is a community-wide gathering that happens after breakfast, where everyone who's going to work that day gets to share important information about goings-on about the farm that day, any appointments that people are going to have to be a part of, off-farm trips that people need to be prepared for, also the daily activity schedule, which includes things that happen after work, so people are apprised of what's available to them to fit into their time for a daytime. And then we wrap up with an inspirational reading, and if we're outside, we have a group sing-along to send each other off to work. After morning meeting, each team sort of divides out into their little pods and heads off to their particular work areas on campus and begin work with a brief check-in. At the bakery, we use that moment to let each other know how we're showing up that day, or set an intention, or ask for some kind of support if necessary for each of us that day, whatever's going on. We find that it's a good opportunity to really notice our physical, mental, and emotional states and be prepared for work together as we start up the morning. And from there, the day's production schedule comes out and we begin to go over it together as a team and divide up the tasks. Each task that we encounter in the bakery is an opportunity for skills practice on various levels. So there are usually opportunities at this point for people to choose something that's more familiar or a rote task if they're needing an easier or a steadier occupation for the morning, or people could choose to have a job that's a little newer or more complex if they're looking for a challenge or needing more intense engagement at that moment. And so through the work of creating the various baked goods or the components of projects to be finished later at the bakery, some of the skills people might work on, these transferable skills that Brett mentioned, include focus, organization, sequencing, going through a recipe. If someone's making pastry cream today, they might need to start off by tuning into what it is they're having to think about with the recipe, reading the list of ingredients, reading through the method, going about and gathering them and getting them in order, and then taking the steps one by one in order as they appear in order to get the process right. People have opportunities for problem solving if they encounter a particular challenge, or if there's a mistake that happens while they're working on something. We might be making a bread recipe and the person working on it notices that the dough is too wet. So we have a chance there to figure out, well, what happened? What went wrong? Can we look back and see where we might have missed an ingredient or might have overmeasured something? How can we walk through a sequence to problem solve here, and what kind of steps can we take to remedy it? And many times there's plenty of checkpoints along the way in all these projects to give people opportunities to sort those things out, find a fix, and recover whatever might have otherwise been a mistake or error, and have a successful project by the end of the day. People have opportunities to build mental and physical stamina by being at work for a day with breaks worked in and managing their time and their tasks. Some people find it useful to use the work to develop and regain gross, fine motor skills as well as physical strength. The bakery is a much more physically demanding place than a lot of people think when they join, and are often surprised by the amount of physical work that goes into being in a bakery. But same is true for all of our work teams. And then, of course, teamwork and communication are involved throughout the day as people are working together, and just various other things. You can look back on the slides at that graphic Brett had pointed out about the skills in heart, mind, and body for more ways in which people are engaging those skills at work. And then during the workday, as Brett had mentioned, sometimes work leaders are called on to coach people through difficult moments. And work is a really useful place for this to be happening in a lot of ways. One could be that if we need to help to redirect people away from negative self-thoughts, like they're experiencing this idea that they're not worth anything or they can't do anything, it's a good moment for a work leader to step in and be able to help remind them of what kind of success they had that morning, or perhaps something that went well in a previous day. And because we also all live together in community, we know each other on different levels and are able to bring that into the room at the moment as well, and remind people of the role they play in other people's lives here at the community, if they're feeling particularly isolated or lost or despairing about something. Using work tasks as mindfulness practices are also a really useful tool for people who are experiencing distraction or uncomfortable moods, emotions, or thoughts. There's a lot of very tangible things in work at the bakery. Working with a dough can be a very thoughtful and physical cue for someone in touching the dough, handling the dough, working through the process. Or again, bringing your focus back to a recipe, going through the steps of arranging the ingredients and then walking through the steps one at a time. A good touchstone for people to bring their attention back to in a moment of distraction. And oftentimes we're also helping people identify and advocate for their own learning style in work, and advocating for accommodations or compensatory strategies if they need them. If a particular technique or skill needed to do a pastry, someone's coming up against a problem with it, we can find ways to help them work around that difficulty, or find a tool that might help overcome whatever problem they're having. Or even just identify, do they like to learn better by hearing instructions or have written instructions in front of them, or walk through a demonstration alongside somebody, and then make all those different ways of learning available to people. And then the tasks we perform in the bakery also vary between individual jobs. Some people might do very solitary work of making a cookie recipe all by themselves. Other jobs are more team-based and can involve groups of 2 or more people. The team jobs provide people opportunity for peer support, to practice teaching or supervising each other, and also managing a project together, building rapport, relationship, teamwork, communication skills. A larger group project like shaping bagels, when you have 150 bagels to shape together, might require 4 or 5 or more people. And so everyone figures out how we're going to share the space, who's going to start dividing the dough, who's going to gather the sheet pans, who's going to start doing the shaping, and the communication and coordination of the space and the people that it takes to kind of pull all of that together happens pretty regularly on the daily, and with several different kinds of jobs throughout the day. The day ends in the bakery with cleanup, and the whole crew pitches in with the tasks necessary to clean the equipment, the workstations, do the dishes, and then set the space up to be ready for the next day. When time allows, we try to have a brief checkout for everyone on the team to reflect on the day behind, different successes and challenges they encountered during the job, and to also then sort of like bring some closure to the day and shift into a possibly more laid-back evening of free time, and how people are going to spend their time together as they relax before the next day of work starts. So that's a little bit about what a day at work looks like at Gould Farm, especially in the bakery. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Sarah at the dorm.
Thank you so much, Nathan and Brett. That was so fun to see all those images. I was thinking about what a awesome time it is to think about abundance and harvest season and just the time of year we find ourselves in. So those images were really, really fun to see, and I really appreciate that. Then I was thinking about, I'm kind of a visual person anyway, and I was thinking about the Google Maps and how you can zoom from one place to another. So I'm zooming us south from the Berkshires down to New York City and Washington, D.C., where the dorm is located, and thinking about transitioning, taking us off the farm and into the heart of the city where we are at the dorm with our young people. And I'd like to just be able to translate some of the kind of ideas that Brett and Nathan were talking about when it comes to the therapeutic benefit of work on a farm, and what that actually looks like when it comes to integrating work into treatment in the city. So at the dorm, we have a requirement that all of our clients spend some time volunteering or working. The focus of treatment at the dorm is really life outside of treatment, and work and volunteer paid work or volunteer positions or some kind of effort in the community is super important. This is especially important for young people who are, typically really eager to establish themselves as independent, to think about feeling like an adult and acting like an adult. It gives them the opportunity to do both, to get the robust mental health support that they need and be able to live their lives independently by working, going to school, and helping them get unstuck in their day-to-day lives. I know a lot of folks really need to take a step away from their life in order to stabilize, and then they're eager to get back at it. And we know in the treatment world, there's always this tension about, what does that transition back to your life look like, and how much natural regression will there be, and what kind of supports can we offer for people when they do re-engage with life, wherever that might be for them in our program in the heart of DC or in New York City. So similar to Gould Farm, which is really rich in the opportunity to be with land and space and trees and pumpkins at this time of year and apples and all that sort of stuff. There's tons of opportunity in the city also to do things to move our lives forward and engage with our community. So we really encourage people to choose something that feels accessible to them, whether it's classes, taking a class at a community college, taking a university class, taking a non-credit bearing class, doing some kind of vocational training or volunteer or paid work after their initial period of stabilization. And we really want to make sure that the goals are really tailored to the readiness and skills of each client. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But of course, the most important part is to make sure that they're ready, a mental health stabilization or other kinds of stabilization that needs to happen so that they can re-enter or enter into the first time these challenges that I think Brett and Nathan were doing such a wonderful job explaining about what comes up when you enter into the task of work. And really recognizing that for some people they've tried before and they need to have a little bit of grieving or stabilization in order to have the confidence and readiness to be able to re-enter and trust that they've got the skills now. When we think about either paid or unpaid work, whether it's service or volunteering work or any kind of paid job, it allows clients to develop a sense of social responsibility or purpose, and even more importantly, an awareness of something outside of themselves, a greater community. They're building the skill of responsibility and accountability. We talk a lot in the dorm. We have a client example that we use frequently where this client was in college and not able to get up for a 1 o'clock class twice a week, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's Tuesday, Thursday, time to wake up, time to get off to class. And he's just sleeping through those classes all the time. And all the other classes, and not doing homework and not doing all the things that a student needs to be able to do. So he needed to step away from school and came into the dorm, and we started engaging with him and starting to think about what would his work life be. And he chose a job at a bakery, and his parents were like, no way our son is going to be getting up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning to go off and work in this bakery. And what did he do? He did, because he chose it. He was ready for it. He was more motivated differently than motivated to get out of bed for class. And of course, helping with this work focus, the volunteer, the service, helps gain perspective about life outside of our own little bubbles. We meet people that we might not be able to meet in other circumstances. And it also gives us the opportunity to connect with people, to have that positive socialization that is so important to be able to get outside of ourselves. I think this is well known, but I wanted to just make sure to highlight that actually there's really significant health benefits of service, that they're across the lifespan from childhood to elderly years or our more senior years. There is documented benefits for being of service to others. So there's some surveys that say that children that have a community service or a role even within their classroom of helping take the lead on cleaning up or things like that feel more confident and proud of themselves. They feel more empathetic to other students, all the way up to people in their retirement years or in senior years talking about the benefits of continuing to be of service or working or volunteering and helping them stay socially engaged and interactive in their life. So this was just one example that really boiled it down to 6 specific benefits, health benefits of service from the Mayo Clinic that really talked about. Study after study indicates that being of service outside of yourself decreases the risk of depression. We already know it gives a sense of purpose and teaches valuable skills. That's what we've been talking about for the last little while today. We know that it helps people stay physically and mentally active. So it helps people move, even if the role is not an active role. It gets them out of bed, it gets them going to a place, commuting, and that keeps them engaged and mentally active and engaged as well. This might be counterintuitive because sometimes people might say, I don't have time, or it's really hard to volunteer, or it's hard to do work, it's hard to be of service, but it actually does reduce stress. So that's one of those counterintuitive things that if you donate, or if you muster the time and put in time to these activities, they'll actually pay dividends more than the actual time that you're sacrificing to do that. There's some studies that say that service can extend your life, add years to your life and quality to the years. And like I said earlier, it helps you meet others and develop new relationships. So when thinking about from a mental health perspective or a treatment perspective, that's all like tick, 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 tick. These are all the things that we're looking for when we're helping people recover from mental health problems or substance use. Just some examples of some work that we do at the dorm. We have had really wonderful partnerships with some organizations in both New York City and DC, where we establish a relationship where we let those groups know, listen, we have a group of people who want to be of service, who we will support and help be really reliable folks that can join your teams. And so just a couple examples of some folks that we've connected with in New York: Gigi's Playhouse and True Colors residents up in New York, among other places, as well as places like the Humane Rescue Alliance in DC. Lots of our clients love animals. That we have had people who work with children who are experiencing homelessness, or even things like a hospital setting. In addition to these formal partnerships that we have with these organizations in DC and New York, we also have a program that we call Justice, Advocacy, and Service. And this is something that we ask each of our clients to participate in, and it can count towards their requirement towards volunteer or work, especially as a foundational step in that direction. It's an in-house group made up of dorm clientele that looks at the issues both internally at the dorm around justice and advocacy, and community engagement around justice and advocacy. It has a focus on social justice and positively contributing to our communities, both the dorm community and the communities of New York and DC. So a couple of photos here of examples of things that we've done. We did actively engage in support of the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the social activism around racial justice that was really active over the summertime, and we continue to be active in different ways now that we've entered into the fall. Doing some specific partnerships with True Colors residents in New York City around a holiday drive around supplies that the young people who live in that residence would need. In addition, we do some things internally within our organization as well, where the group can give us feedback as staff and as a community about ways to make our community more just. And in particular, you might notice that the dorm staff have our pronouns by our name, which is a direct result of this work, where a client of ours made that suggestion that would be beneficial to prevent anybody from being misgendered. So we've adopted that as a suggestion across the board as staff. Of course, we really need to build the foundation in order to set people up for success for engagement in work outside or in addition to treatment. And Brett and Nathan talked about this as well. It's really about troubleshooting building the skills that are necessary in order to be able to be successful, knowing that there will be times that we need to troubleshoot in real time when things come up, whether it be a disappointment, a perceived rejection, a conflict, or that negative self-talk about I can't, and turning that into I can contribute something. So we're really working hard with our clients to assess their readiness to work, their skills, their interests, and following their lead when it comes to supporting them to follow what it is that they are actually interested in doing, which often includes a reality check for parents in particular. There are often, and clients, there are for young people, there's often a kind of an idea about a track that somebody should be on, whether it be a university track or certain timing around graduating from university at a certain point and getting your first job at a certain point. And what we know is that that timing is arbitrary and the track is arbitrary. So it's more important to match goals to be appropriate for recovery goals, and thinking about, what would actually be appropriate for each individual. Urban environments have tons of opportunities, but not every opportunity is a fit for every young person. So we're really having these conversations with clients and their families about what's realistic for you and what do you want to do, not just what are your family members telling you to do, what are your peers doing. It's about choosing the right path for you. Of course, we need to focus on really practical skills for the classroom and the workplace. So we're focusing on building those executive function skills. How do you get out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work at a bakery? What time do you need to go to sleep? How do you set up your space for success so that you can meet the expectations that you need to show up on time and be a productive contributor? We're talking about communication skills. We've been coaching our clients through interview skills, especially in adjusting to the Zoom world that we're all in now, that, we need to engage a little bit differently than we would maybe than in an in-person interview, where we can sit across a room for somebody and make eye contact naturally. What is it actually like to be present on Zoom? And I know for myself, I had a coaching session with a client just a couple weeks ago who was preparing for a Zoom interview for a job, and his closet door was open behind him, full of a mess of what a young man's closet might look like. You can imagine what that would look like. I said, you need to close the door. Make sure that when you get on this interview, you close that door. And he's like, yeah, of course. But just reminding, those are some really basics. Of course, conflict management and relationship skills are really important, and exactly what people are going to be able to get out of their work experience as well. And then, of course, building on successes and challenges as they come up. And this is that real-time coaching that Nathan and Brett were talking about, that the blessing of engaging in these types of activities at the same time as treatment is that we can run alongside people, celebrate their successes, support them in those, and also help them troubleshoot and make some adjustments around their challenges. So it comes with real life wins and real life struggles, which as a therapist, I think it helps the therapy become more real instead of theoretical. We're our biggest client supporters. We are also going to tell them the truth if they need to have some adjustments or approach something in a way that is going to keep them from experiencing the same challenges over and over and over again. Of course, COVID-19, as we all know, is still with us. Here we are on Zoom once again, and now here we're coming to the end of the year and things looking even bleaker than before. It's made the landscape with work and school even more difficult. We are adjusting. I think I keep talking with clients that at least in March, we had no idea what was going on. So we were all winging it. At least now we have a lot more of an ability to predict what is it that is realistic to believe about virtual classes, about the work opportunities, about something that can be done in person versus virtually. And I think that is an example of things that the skills that we've gained along the way, that we are building skills that we probably didn't ask for. We didn't know we needed last year before this pandemic was a reality. But when we come out of it, we're going to have the opportunity to look back and say, wow, I learned a lot about navigating and the challenges that are just coming at us, the resiliency that we can have. And now we know how to interact in a virtual landscape so much more than we did before, which then opens up the opportunity to do things like work in organizations that are outside your geographic location, or have more of a hybrid experience for people that might work for, where they're able to work on online or from home more easily than they would have been maybe 2 or 3 years ago before this was an issue. So, you know, we're all challenged by this. I think those of us who work in programs have been challenged. Our clients have been challenged by it. And on the days that I'm feeling very exhausted by all of this, I just remind myself that feeling is because we're expanding ourselves. We're really pushing ourselves and gaining things along the way, even if we don't have the awareness in that moment of what we're gaining. So if we can really encourage our clients to keep at it, I think we'll start to feel proud of ourselves about what we've gotten through. So on that note, I want to say thank you to all of you for your attention this afternoon, and turn us over to John for some question and answer, or maybe some more pictures or description of what's so.
What I was going to ask for.
Farm.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nathan and Brett, all of you guys, for a very productive conversation, and more importantly, some really exciting images that certainly resonated with me as we head into this holiday season. I'm particularly intrigued with this topic of purpose, and Nathan and Brett, you guys, you know, really underscored, you know, why I think we are living very much nationally in a mental health crisis right now, with the level of unemployment that we're seeing, with the disruption in schedules, with schools, with life sort of online. Folks have lost the ability that you guys have sort of described being the sort of necessary therapeutic value of a work-based program. And we've certainly done everything we can to keep that going in more of a city setting, with, of course, the COVID restrictions that we're all, you know, living within. So certainly, in addition to any questions or comments that you guys may have in terms of the presentation, I'd also really love to encourage all of us to share any experiences we've had with helping clients to find purpose, even with ourselves, in terms of our own ability to find purpose during these unprecedented times. So with that, I'll be quiet, and please go ahead and turn off your mic and feel free to chime in.
So I actually had a question for Brett and Sarah. And thank you, first of all, for the presentation. I think it was excellent. I truly believe in the value of work, and you guys are really doing a wonderful job giving them purpose and something to do. Post your program, where you've kind of designed a program where you've given them jobs and they perform those jobs, and then when you're sending them out into the world, you talked about their readiness to be part of that world. But I also wonder if you help them think about their place in it through career counseling. When you do that transition plan and you set up the 30 hours of work in your transition house, Brett, do you have opportunities for them to maybe explore their interests or things that they value, in addition to that other purposeful work? The same for you, Sarah, as you think about preparing them for work. You know, you said you were evaluating, assessing whether they should go to this school or trade school or what they should do. Is there also some thought about what it is that they should be doing based upon who they are?
Definitely. I think, you know, a big piece of our transition process is having guests work with our transition counselor, Dana, who I believe is in one of the blank squares here. But she typically does what's called the discovery process with people, to look at their values, interests, skills, and compare those with what's available, and, you know, other factors about how they want their life to look, as a sort of guiding map to determine what someone's going to set up after the farm.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. I similar to what Brett's describing, we do the same types of assessment of skills and interest and aptitudes. And that happens through a variety of ways, whether that be neuropsychological testing that can inform some of our choices. It's also around some trial and error. So we work with clients to identify what they might want to try out, and we can work with people. You know, one of the coolest things about the dorm is that we have a really flexible length of stay. There's no minimum or maximum. So for those folks who are gaining benefits from continuing to be in the program, we can run alongside as they try out what it is like to take a class, or try out what it's like to do part-time work at a bakery or a retail shop or a think tank. You know, and we have a variety of different opportunities depending on what people are interested in their own goals. And then we troubleshoot and say, how's that working and not working? And how do we want to adjust in real time along the way, which is a real gift to be able to do that alongside in real time.
And I would add too that our guest experience and work program provides a lot in formulating what is next too. That our transition counselor is in a lot of communication with work leaders, and often when guests are approaching transition, that becomes a focus of those meetings with their work leaders about what feedback the work leaders have in terms of what would be doable, what they see as really getting the guest excited in work and the like.
Makes me think of a young person I worked with previously who thought she wanted to be a person who cuts hair. I am losing the word, a cosmetology or something. And she went to some training and got a job. And she realized she didn't like being in physical contact with people all of the time. And she had she didn't really realize how much she would be touching people in that line of work. And she was like, this is not for me. And she made an adjustment. So those kinds of things, as you're doing it in real time, you kind of start to see the things that you like and don't like, and hone, you know, what would be a better fit for you.
I just want to underscore, you know, both of you guys have talked about the importance of exposure. And Dan, I really appreciate your comment. I think both of our programs offer time, which is unusual. We're an average of about 12 months. Brett, I'm not sure what the farm is, but I'm assuming it's sort of in the same neighborhood in terms of length of stay. You know, having those opportunities for exposure is so critical, because the first question we like to ask our folks is, what do you want? And sometimes that takes 90 days for them to actually be able to answer. They've never been asked before. They've been living somebody else's life, so it's really easy to say, I'm not gonna live it, and I'm not gonna get up for it, and there's no reason to, because it's not mine. So part of that therapeutic journey is being able to make some of those decisions. You know, having that level of exposure, trying something and struggling at it. So certainly we're behind the scenes sort of assessing appropriateness, if you will, but also want to run alongside opportunities like waking up at 4 a.m. to work at a bakery. So we have a couple of questions here in the chat box. This is from Carson. How can you ensure continuity from the work you do in residential setting forward into the community post-discharge with respect to vocational and/or educational goals?
It's tough in reality. Yeah, I think we try to have a workable, reasonable plan with a lot of information and trial and error from someone's time at the farm. Yeah, and you know, another piece, I appreciated everything Sarah said about the benefit of volunteering, and we often recommend that initially after leaving the farm, people volunteer rather than do paid work as a sort of transitional step.
I would add in that as a program that's often used as a transition between something like Gould Farm and nothing, you know, or just outpatient treatment, we really benefit from all the gifts that people gain when they've been in a program like Gould Farm, and we can then say, okay, I think about the dorms programming as a translation often from the really rich therapeutic work that's happening in previous programs and in our own program, and translating that to what happens tomorrow or later tonight or over the weekend when these kinds of things pop up. And we're helping young people in particular learn the language of translating that therapeutic experience to how to tell their story, how to ask for help, how to advocate for themselves, how to communicate in the midst of a conflict or things like that. And those, having practiced those skills in programs like Gould Farm or other kinds of experiences, then fast forward our ability to do that and say, applying it to real life. It's a real opportunity for us.
So Carson asked one other question I'll get to. Jane, do you want to jump in? You just leaned in there. I saw you.
Sorry, this is Dana. I'm the transition counselor at
Oh,
Gould.
sorry, Dana.
We just wanted to add that also we have a transition program at Gould Farm where guests move into the community, and within the transition, there's one locally and one in Boston, and within the transition program, there's still the support of myself and our vocational counselor in Boston. So I think that is a good way to continue the continuity and build up the skills and momentum of volunteer. You know, in many cases it starts as volunteer work and then helping to translate into paid work, and then, you know, going from there into moving on their own out of the program.
And I think another important thing to note is that we often are also trying to help people understand what supports they're going to need when they leave here. If people can't go into one of our transition programs, or you know, just further are heading out into something else, you know, we're always working, work leaders are working with, clinicians are working with, everyone in the community is kind of helping people understand what kind of supports are going to be most useful and necessary to them as they go out. What kind of work do they like to do? Again, like Sarah and Brett have both said and identified, what kind of schedule works well for them? What is their learning style? How do they like to go out into the world? And what kinds of things do they need to do to take care of themselves? Just stepping out of, to be on their own in other ways. Even if we can't set up more concrete supports, but helping people identify the supports they need for themselves and the communities they need to surround themselves with when they leave the farm.
Thank you, Nathan. So we have time for one more. Carson, you had sent in one other question that I'll quickly get to here. I love the quote from the roundtable last month that launch is about how one lives, not where. Thank you for that. Given that so many young adults are living with parents at a stage in life where they had pictured themselves living on their own, what is the right role for parents while young adults try to engage around their purpose?
We have that conversation so much. we include weekly calls with parents that parents often think are going to be updates about their clients, and we do provide a brief update, and then we turn it on to them and say, and now about you, and how can you be the best supporter to your young adult child at this time in their life? And so we're having that conversation frequently about understanding their hopes and expectations for their young adult, understanding who their young adult child is and what their own child's hopes and expectations for themselves are, and where those things intersect and where those things divide. And that is a really important therapeutic task, not only for the young adult, but also for the parents to truly understand and see their young person for who they are, which might mean shifting a little bit from what they thought their young adult was. And maybe that means just simply interests. You know, maybe they thought they were going to be a doctor and they're really interested in banking, you know, or maybe because they thought they were going to have a traditional 9-to-5 job and they actually more of a non-traditional schedule, you know, in the arts or something like that. So, you know, we're really navigating that changing relationship through emerging adulthood is really crucial for both the parents to do and the young person to do.
Brett,
Yeah,
if
and I would just
could add in-
underscore that the answer is as multiple as there are parent and child pairs. That's really looking at where the child is at and what's going on for them right now, and who the parent is, and sort of working together to figure out what's most helpful.
Thank you for that, guys. Virgil just put forth a question, which I think is an important one that we can close with here, and that's that the importance of sense of purpose. I believe the loss of purpose greatly increases the risk of suicide. How does each program measure the client guest increase in sense of purpose? A quick one, Sarah.
I was trying to figure out how to talk to that about in 30 seconds with everybody needing to get off their 4 o'clock appointment. But you're right, Virgil, that purpose and hopefulness and future orientation is crucial in recovering a meaning to life and desire to continue to engage in the challenges and successes that life is. So we are always focusing on that, and what I think is truly empowering the client to say what it is that their purpose is going to have a lot more value and sustainability than somebody else's purpose for that person.
And I think for us, it's an ongoing conversation, and we try to have spaces to have that conversation in as many forums as possible. So to facilitate conversation with work leaders about what's feeling meaningful there, what's feeling meaningful in the community and in the residents, and certainly, of course, in the ongoing therapy.
Just to add one more comment on that one, from a research perspective, there are certain scales that can indicate where a client is feeling from just a sense of purpose and connection perspective. And we do administer these questionnaires every 3 months, and it's really fascinating to look at how their scores change on like rejection scales or friendship scales that are correlated with, a sense of purpose. And there certainly is, a positive correlation on certain valid and reliable scales, as a client is progressing through treatment, that we're seeing that they are feeling more fulfilled in life and more connected and less rejected, and do feel a greater sense of purpose.
Thank you all. I really appreciate this time, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It is exactly 4 o'clock. Enjoy your 4 o'clock. We'll see you shortly, and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you. You too.